My name is Alex Field.
I'm Will Jacoby.
I'm Blake Woodward, and our topic is gun control. We're open for questions.
Can somebody start out by defining gun control for me?
Gun control is like the set of laws or policies that are placed to regulate the manufacture, sale, transfer, possession, modification, and use of firearms by the civilians.
How does that jive with the Second Amendment?
The Second Amendment guarantees the right to keep and bear firearms.
Okay.
And a lot of people think that that's like just what it is, but the Second Amendment is actually bigger than that. The whole Second Amendment states a well-regulated militia being necessary to keep the security of the free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So like, in essence, the quarrel or debate basically comes down to whether keeping and bearing arms is a collective right or an individual right. And like a collective right being with regards to the states maintaining a militia, or an individual right guaranteed to each of the Americans, whether they're a member of the military or not.
So if I'm somebody who believes that it is an individual right, and you just read that they don't have the right to infringe upon that, wouldn't gun control infringe upon that automatically?
Can you explain your question?
Okay. If I take the Second Amendment to mean individual rights, not just militia rights, and then gun control is regulating manufacture, ownership, transfer, all the things that you stated, isn't gun control inherently violating the Second Amendment right because it's infringing?
That's how the gun rights supporters see it.
Both sides believe that regulation is necessary and it's essential for the safety, of people. I mean, why do we have the FDA and food regulation? I mean, so the question is mainly of how much regulation and what type of regulation there should be. It's not, does the government have the right to regulate? It's what kind and how much.
So let's talk about our own state. What's the process for owning a gun?
Basically, you go, if you're going to a store, like Bud's Gun Shop here in town, you would go in, you would fill out a form that the FFL or whoever you're doing the transaction with at the business, they would give you a form. And they have an FFL license, a federal firearms license, which allows them to do business and transactions with guns. And what they would do, we have the federal background check, or the NICS, which is the National Instant Criminal Background Check System. So they would run your name and your date of birth through a database. It usually takes a few minutes, but the FBI has up to a 3-day waiting period to get back to you if you're not allowed to buy the gun. But if they've not determined that in 3 days, you can go along with the purchase anyway.
We've been reading a lot about, about gun incidents in schools. So what would you think about a teacher having the right to have a gun in the classroom?
Me personally, I don't really have an opinion on that. I mean, I don't see it as necessary. I mean, right now we have gun-free zones in schools. There have been a few guns found in Tates Creek in the past couple of weeks, but there hasn't been an incident here recently with a teacher trying to defend themselves from a student with a deadly weapon. So I don't really have an opinion on it. I don't see it as necessary for a teacher to carry a gun because we have gun-free zones, and if the gun is found on property of the school, it's a federal law, which is punishable up to a maximum of 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine, I believe. So there's not supposed to be guns on property, and it's not usually happening that often. It's a big story on LEX18 right now, finding these guns, 2 of which were loaded. But
Alex, tell me a little bit about the gun control laws in the United States. are they applied equally across the nation? Are there different places where they differ?
You mean like in the United States?
And are there different places where is it easier or harder to obtain a firearm, own a firearm, carry a firearm in different places? How are those gun control laws applied across the nation?
So I did a research on Virginia. So as I researched, I found out like it's more easier to buy a gun because if you're older than 21 years old, and you can buy a gun, and they don't limit the gun type. You can buy any gun except the machine gun and fully automatic weapons.
Okay.
And also, I do a research on the Illinois. They said if you have like a permission, it's called FOID, it's like firearm owners identification. If you have that, you can buy a gun, and you also need to be like more than 21 years old.
In Illinois?
Yes.
Okay.
As far as the United States, are there any other countries that are stricter? I mean, how do we compare to other countries?
Okay, this is the topic I'm mainly focused on. So because I'm from China, so I think like China is famous of like a very strict gun control in China. You maybe not hear too much like a gun crime or like a gun control news from China, because like in China there's a very long, it's not very long, it's like a 40 years history of controlling the guns. And it starts in like it's from like the cultural evolution. It's a big event in China. It's like Renaissance, but there's bad effect, not the good effect like the Renaissance. So during that time, like a lot of like non-educated people want to fight educated people, and like most officer, like teacher or officer in the office, like in the policeman, they are educated, and they want to like because I didn't explain this, like in the Cultural Revolution, there's a lot of chaos, and Chairman Mao was a farmer, but he's an educated farmer. So what his purpose is like let everybody, because he's a communist, he wants everybody equal, and this like uneducated people want to gain some power, like get a higher position, so they just rob their guns from the educated people. So there's caused a lot of chaos, like a lot of people get a gun from by illegal ways, and so if the guns go to the bad people, there's they will be terrible. So the Chinese government start to restrict the gun, like you have to give the gun to the police station, and if not, you will be in jail for like 3 years. That's in the 1980s, and later on, since when the Chinese is more developed, there are some guns in the south part of China. So if the guns goes to bad people, that's guns is a very bad part of the society. It's more dangerous than the people who like uneducated just bear the arm. So the government start a law that you totally can't have a gun. If you found it, you maybe got you're in the prison forever. I don't know that word in English, but it's like in the prison forever. And recently, we even banned BB guns, like the airsoft guns, because just like people in America, they like modify the semi-auto rifle to the assault rifle. Like some people modify their BB gun to shooting the metal balls. So government think that's dangerous as well, and they start to ban the airsoft gun. And but things is kind of different in here and in some Europe country, and I don't think people ban BB gun and airsoft here, because I saw in the mall, and there's and do a research about England, And they said if you bear a BB gun or airsoft gun, you just like you need to put a signal on that. Is that you call it? That's not real guns. And my personal views of gun control is I totally support it. I think it should it should be restricted people bear arms. At least it has to be registered to the government. And because gun control is always a big topic, for the American people, and also because there's tons of guns in America, it's hard to control. And I saw the percentage of there's 112 guns per 100 person. So it's everybody have a gun, at least one guns. So, but the other country is different. And other country is like in China, just only 4 people have guns in 100 people in China. And in Russia, it's 8 people have guns. England is 6 people per 100 person. So the topic is kind of different. And I know it's hard to control the gun in here, but it's to restrict the gun here.
Hard to restrict when there's so many more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can let me just pull you off topic just a little bit. Can somebody explain the Brady Bill to me? This is something I've heard a lot about, and I know that plays into gun control.
The Brady Bill in 1993, Congress mandated the federal background checks of the purchases and imposed a 5-day waiting period until the NICS, which he talked about, and system got implemented in 1998, and that just, like he said, that puts your name and your birth year in it, and it just scans it for criminal background, basically.
It was a 5-day waiting period at the time. Is that because Will? I think I can go into Bud's and buy a 9mm without waiting 5 days, can't I?
Well, no.
I did, actually.
Well, it's 3 days now.
Okay.
What the NICS was implemented in 1998. Bill
Okay.
Clinton signed that into law in 1993, but basically it runs you through real quick, and if your name is associated with somebody else who has a criminal background, they'll investigate that further.
Okay.
Blake, we just had a political election, new president. What's the difference between the two parties, Democrat and Republican, and their views on gun ownership and gun control?
Well, typically the Democrats have more of a liberal gun control. They support gun control more, and the Republicans support gun rights more, typically.
Donald Trump has a concealed and carry license, and he is a member of the NRA, which is the biggest gun lobbyist, the biggest lobbyist, single issue lobbyist there is. So a lot of money, a lot of influence.
Are there any statistics on the deaths the deaths that are caused by a gun, suicide-wise?
Yeah, so 61% of firearm fatalities in the United States are due to suicides. And 90% of those, that number comes from the CDC, by the way, and 90% of those suicides usually deal with people who have depression, another mental disorder, or substance abuse, or a combination of those. And that comes from a girl named Eve Miskiki at the Institute of Mental Health here in the U.S., who came up with 90% of the suicide rate. But the majority of firearm fatalities are suicides.
So are there any type of laws out there that would prohibit people with a past of depression, anxiety, so on and so forth, to get a gun?
That's what Obama's Now is the Time plan that he began implementing in 2013 goes towards. He issued 23 executive orders, and there's a lot in those executive orders of what he wanted to do. But the main issue, the idea of guns kill people, or people kill people, guns with people, or people with guns kill people, and the fact is that there is a mental aspect to this of people who are not mentally stable to own a firearm, who have these things, shouldn't be allowed to own a gun. And what you asked is, no, currently there's not any laws in place that I know of.
Thank you.
Will you talk to us about the correlation between gun ownership and crime, specifically maybe here in the United States, but then also maybe some of the other countries around the world? Because I think that's probably one of the biggest arguments for gun control is that it will lower violent crime.
Yeah, so a poll in 1997 among prisoners, 70% of them who were in jail because of a firearm, they got it from a family member or someone off the streets. They themselves were not able to buy a gun. So the majority of gun owners, there's not a direct link between gun owners and criminality. In Chicago, for example, very high crime rate, and that's a gun-free zone. They're not allowed to buy a gun there. I read a statement from a lawyer in Chicago, and he stated that about half of the public school students between freshman and senior year drop out of high school. Now, when you drop out of high school, you don't have a higher education, you're not able to get a decent job. That leads, you're more prone to participate in criminal activities. That's just an established fact. So that gun violence in Chicago is not based on owning a gun. It's more of people who have or are just uneducated and are prone to criminality.
Can you be a little more specific, maybe with some statistics on gun violence in the United States? Or in Kentucky?
Gun. I mean, I don't know. I don't really have any statistics
Okay.
on gun violence. It varies per state. California, Illinois, New Jersey, those are a lot higher. Louisiana, they have higher gun violent rates than other states here in the United States. If you excluded certain states from our overall statistics of gun violence, we would match, Britain and other countries for gun violence that have very strict gun laws and things of that nature.
Okay.
I think we mentioned earlier about restricting assault weapons. I think maybe Alex had mentioned that. Somebody had mentioned that. I seem to remember we talked about Bill Clinton as well. Somebody had mentioned the Brady, when we were talking about the Brady bill. I seem to remember there was an assault weapons ban, I believe, put in place during the Clinton administration. However, I have it on pretty good knowledge that I could go to Bud's gun shop, not to pick on Bud's, but we brought it up, and I could get an AR-15 right now.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly there'd be a background check, but
Yeah.
if we have an assault weapons ban and there's an AR-15, how does that work?
And will you talk about the distinction there? When people on the news and the media refer to an assault weapon, what are they,
Yeah.
because that is
Good
commonly
mention.
misused.
Let's qualify that
Yeah,
first.
let's
And then-
qualify
So
that
it is an
too.
assault.
Thank you for
So
that.
basically, the term has varied a lot over the years per state and different legislatures, but it's mainly weapons that are military grade, but there's also characteristics outlined like muzzle flash suppressors, pistol grips, magazine,
Barreling.
yeah, exactly. So it's something that, it's a military rifle, basically, is what an assault weapon is. In Sandy Hook, they had restrictions on guns and assault weapons in Connecticut, and the weapon he used was an AR-15 Bushmaster 223, which was legal to buy, which wasn't considered an assault weapon.
It didn't meet certain qualifications.
No.
To be an assault.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit more about the ban. Blake, do you know anything about the assault weapons ban?
I know that it's different for states.
Mhm.
Like in California, in Kentucky, you don't need a permit, like a gun license to have firearms in general, handguns or rifles, shotguns, but you do need